The room was tense even before Jasmine Crockett leaned into the microphone. But nobody, not the audience, not the reporters, not even Pam Bondi herself, was ready for what came next. $500 million, Crockett declared, her voice sharp, cutting through the static of routine testimony. That's what you've been hiding. That's what the public deserves to know. Gasps shot across the chamber. Bondi, usually calm and composed, froze. Her eyes widened, her lips parted, but words refused to come. For a split second, silence reigned. And then whispers turned into a buzz. Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras zoomed in tight. This wasn't a minor revelation. It was a bombshell. Crockett didn't flinch. She repeated the figure, slow and deliberate, like a hammer striking steel. 500 million. The gravity of the number hit like a thunderclap. This wasn't some minor misstep. This was a revelation that could unravel reputations, topple alliances, and expose a trail of influence that Bondi had worked tirelessly to keep buried. Bondi shifted in her chair, fumbling with her notes, her carefully polished confidence cracking in front of millions watching live. This was supposed to be her moment to shine, to defend her record. Instead, she was unraveling in real time, and the cameras weren't looking away. Before I go further, make sure you hit subscribe right now. You don't want to miss how this moment spiraled into one of the most humiliating breakdowns in political history. As the buzz swelled, Crockett pressed forward, her tone unwavering. You can dress it up any way you like, Ms. Bondi, but money doesn't lie. And neither do receipts. The stage was set. The figure was out. And Pam Bondi had no escape. The number, $500 million, wasn't just eye-popping. It was staggering, almost incomprehensible in scope. This wasn't pocket change, or even the kind of sum that gets quietly shuffled around in the shadows of lobbying. It was $500 million, enough to sway decisions, silence critics, and bend the will of institutions that claim to serve the public. That's what made Crockett's revelation so devastating. Because behind that figure lay a bigger question. What was it buying? Influence? Access? Silence? And if so, who had been compromised along the way? Pam Bondi had built her brand on polished speeches and a reputation for toughness, projecting an image of someone immune to pressure. But the exposure of this financial secret didn't just call her integrity into question, it put her entire narrative under siege. The stakes were no longer about a political skirmish between two figures. They were about the public's trust in governance itself. If Crockett was right, and if the receipts she hinted at held true, then the scandal could ripple across networks of donors, power brokers, and political players who had long assumed their dealings would never see daylight. And Crockett knew it. Her delivery wasn't casual, it was surgical. By putting the number out in the open, she ensured it couldn't be ignored. Every headline, every news cycle, every late-night monologue would now circle back to that one figure. 500 million. Bondi wasn't just cornered. She was standing on the edge of a political cliff, her credibility dangling by a thread. And Crockett had just handed the world a pair of scissors. Pam Bondi wasn't a newcomer to the spotlight. For years, she had cultivated the image of a fearless prosecutor, someone who claimed to stand for law, order, and accountability. Her charm, combined with sharp courtroom skills, made her a fixture in high-profile cases. To her supporters, she embodied confidence and poise. To her critics, she embodied ambition at any cost. That ambition propelled her beyond state politics and into the national arena. She became a familiar face on cable networks, a defender of conservative causes, and a reliable ally to powerful figures. But with that rise came questions. Questions about her ties to corporate donors, her lucrative consulting work, and the thin line she often walked between public service and private gain. What set Bondi apart wasn't just her political savvy, it was her ability to project control. She rarely faltered in front of cameras, always armed with polished talking points and a smile that suggested she was one step ahead. Yet behind the sheen of confidence, whispers persisted. Deals that seemed too convenient. Donations that appeared at just the right time. Connections that raised eyebrows among watchdogs. For a long time, those whispers never broke through. Bondi had mastered the art of staying untouchable. Her reputation, buffered by allies in power and a media machine, willing to give her the benefit of the doubt. That's why Crockett's exposure was so lethal. It wasn't attacking Bondi's words or her politics. It was slicing open the very foundation of her brand. For a woman who built her identity on strength and credibility, being cornered by a $500 million revelation was more than embarrassing. It was existential. Jasmine Crockett's rise to this moment didn't happen by chance. Long before she was making headlines in fiery hearings, she was known in her community as a relentless advocate for justice. Born into modest circumstances, she carried with her the experiences of people who often felt unheard in the halls of power. That grounding gave her both authenticity and a sharp edge, qualities that set her apart from the polished, career politicians around her. Her path began in the courtroom, not the Capitol. As a civil rights and criminal defense attorney, she fought for clients who couldn't afford high-powered representation. She saw firsthand how the system bent against the marginalized, and she learned how to dismantle shaky arguments with precision. Those battles gave her the composure and discipline that would later make her such a formidable presence in Congress. What made Crockett different wasn't just her intelligence. It was her refusal to back down. She was known for being direct, sometimes blunt, but always grounded in fact. To her supporters, she embodied the frustration and determination of every day. Americans tired of watching corruption flourish unchecked. Her move into politics wasn't about chasing influence. It was about extending her fight for fairness onto a bigger stage, and in that hearing room with Pam Bondi, the years of preparation, the courtroom experience, and the moral clarity all came together. She wasn't just another politician trying to score points. She was a fighter carrying the weight of truth, representing those who never got the microphone. And that authenticity gave her the power to deliver the line that would stop Bondi cold and remind the country why voices like hers matter. The atmosphere in the hearing room shifted the moment. Jasmine Crockett leaned forward and fixed her eyes on Pam Bondi. Up to this point, Bondi had spoken with confidence, weaving her narrative with the ease of someone accustomed to the spotlight. But Crockett wasn't buying it, and the audience could feel that change coming. Crockett began methodically, dismantling Bondi's claims point by point. Her tone was sharp, her language precise, and each question cut deeper than the last. Bondi tried to counter with broad generalizations and polished rhetoric, but Crockett wasn't giving her that space. She kept pressing, demanding specifics where Bondi had none. The tension grew so thick that even members of the press leaned closer, waiting for the inevitable clash. Then came the pivot, the moment Crockett dropped the figure, 500 million? Gasps echoed through the room. Bondi's smile faltered, her rehearsed rhythm broken. Crockett didn't just throw out a number, she tied it directly to Bondi's record, linking it to actions and decisions that were suddenly being painted in a far more sinister light. Bondi attempted to recover, but the damage was already visible. Her voice wavered, her answers grew longer and less coherent. The crowd picked up on it instantly, whispering and shaking their heads. Crockett, sensing the shift, leaned in harder. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The calm, deliberate way she repeated her question only amplified the pressure. Every attempt by Bondi to steer the conversation elsewhere was dragged back by Crockett's relentless focus. It was a masterclass in control. Bondi was no longer setting the narrative. She was scrambling, reacting, and visibly unraveling under the weight of the accusation. By the time Crockett delivered the line that tied everything together. What started as a battle of words had escalated into a complete dismantling, and Bondi found herself cornered with nowhere to turn. The tension in the chamber reached its breaking point the moment Crockett leaned back in her chair, letting the silence stretch, just long enough for everyone to realize something big was coming. $500 million? She said again, this time slower, each syllable deliberate, as though hammering the number into the record. That's not speculation. That's documented. And the public deserves to know why those funds remain hidden. Crockett seized the opening. You've built a career painting yourself as a champion of justice, she continued, her tone steady and piercing. But how does a so-called defender of the people explain $500 million being funneled away outside of public accountability? That's not just negligence, it's betrayal. Bondi's face flushed, her eyes darting between the panel and the cameras. She tried to push back, accusing Crockett of politicizing the moment. But the room wasn't buying it. The audience had shifted. What started as skepticism toward Crockett was now outrage toward Bondi. Every denial, every excuse only deepened the hole she was standing in. Crockett didn't let up. She reminded the chamber of the stakes, of the communities that could have benefited from those funds, of the lives impacted by the decisions tied to that money. The room was electric. Bondi's collapse was no longer a private unraveling. It was a public implosion. And Crockett, with her unshakable poise, had positioned herself not just as an opponent, but as the voice of accountability. By the time Crockett's final words echoed through the chamber, the damage was irreversible. Bondi wasn't just exposed, she was finished. The fallout from Jasmine. Crockett's revelation was immediate and fierce. Within minutes of the hearing, clips of Pam Bondi's unraveling flooded social media. Hashtags like Joe Crockett exposes and 500 million scandal began trending on X and TikTok. Viewers replayed the exact moment Bondi's composure shattered, dissecting her every expression as Crockett pressed her with the damning figure. Progressive voices online hailed the exchange as a defining moment of accountability. Commentators compared Crockett's precision to a surgeon's scalpel, praising her for refusing to let political theater overshadow the facts. Memes spread rapidly, with side-by-side images of Bondi's once confident smile dissolving into panic. For many, the symbolism was undeniable, the powerful being brought down by truth delivered without fear. But the reaction wasn't confined to social media. News outlets across the spectrum scrambled to cover the story, even outlets usually friendly to Bondi couldn't ignore the spectacle, airing segments that highlighted her shaky responses and evasive answers. On the ground, activists seized the moment. Organizations advocating for financial transparency and justice used Crockett's words to rally support, launching petitions and calls for further investigation into the $500 million scandal. Community leaders echoed her framing, pointing out how much good that money could have done if allocated properly. In the days that followed, it became clear this was more than a viral moment. It was a cultural flashpoint. Every major network led with the same headline: Bondi cornered, Crockett exposes. 500 million secret. It wasn't just the story of the day. It became the story of the week. Cable news replayed the clip on an endless loop, dissecting Crockett's tone, timing, and confidence. Analysts marveled at how seamlessly she pivoted from lawyerly precision to fiery moral outrage, all while keeping the focus squarely on the staggering $500 million figure. The spectacle was compared to legendary courtroom moments, the kind that shift public consciousness overnight. Opinion pieces poured in. Some praised Crockett as the embodiment of accountability in an age of evasion, while others cautiously speculated on what the revelation could mean for Bondi's career and credibility. Editorial boards framed the exchange as a turning point, where silence and avoidance were no longer acceptable. Answers in the face of hard facts. Meanwhile, late-night comedians seized on Bondi's breakdown, crafting monologues around her visibly shaken demeanor. Audiences laughed, but the laughter carried a sharp undertone. It was humor rooted in disbelief that such a massive figure could be tied to someone who once wielded so much influence. When the dust settled, one truth became clear. This was more than a clash between two figures. It was a lesson about what happens when unchecked. Power collides with unshakable integrity. Pam Bondi's collapse under the weight of Crockett's revelation wasn't just about one individual being exposed. It was a mirror held up to a system that too often hides its dealings behind closed doors and glossy press statements. Crockett reminded the nation that accountability isn't just a slogan, it's a responsibility. Her willingness to speak plainly, armed with facts, showed the audience that courage can level the playing field, even against those backed by wealth, influence, and prestige. At a time when many feel disillusioned about whether justice truly applies to the powerful, Crockett's words struck like lightning, a reminder that truth still carries force. The $500 million figure became more than a number. It symbolized lost opportunities, funds that could have transformed communities, funded schools, or provided health care. Crockett's framing pushed viewers to think about what's really at stake when leaders abuse trust. It isn't just corruption, it's the theft of dignity, security, and progress from ordinary people. And so the moral lesson was clear. In moments of doubt, integrity still matters. In an era of political theater, authenticity still resonates. And when someone like Jasmine Crockett stands tall, it isn't just her victory, it's a reminder that every voice raised for justice strengthens the fabric of democracy. Her clash with Bondi will be remembered not as a scandal, but as proof, even in a broken system, truth still has the power to break through. If you believe in truth over corruption, make sure to subscribe now and join the movement for accountability.